All right, so get this. We're going deep on something you experience every single day. You ready?
Hit me with it.
Justice and rights. We're going to break down this presentation called, get this, Justice and Rights 101. Kind of funny title, right?
Yeah.
But it lays out how these concepts really shape our world.
Yeah, it might sound a little academic, but I think you'll find it's way more interesting than you think. Gets fascinating real fast.
No doubt. I mean, really, what even I ask justice? Is it the same for everyone? And what about our rights? You know, those things we kind of take for granted. How do those even actually, like, work?
That's what we're going to find out. We're looking at the difference between rights, the ones in the law books, and then the ones people say are, like, universal, even if no one wrote them down.
That makes me think, what happens when those two kinds of rights clash? Is something automatically right just because, some law says it is?
Oh, those are the good questions.
Yeah.
That's what we're tackling today.
Love it. Okay, so before we get too deep, let's get on the same page. The presentation starts by defining some key terms. Justice, rights, legal rights, moral rights. Oh, and responsibilities.
Yeah, and so think of it like this. The presentation keeps using this visual, right? It's a balance scale.
Okay, I like where this is going.
The idea is we're always trying to find that balance between, what individuals want, the freedoms, and then what it takes for society to actually function. And all these terms, they're like different weights on that scale.
Ooh, I like that. Okay, so justice. What's the working definition here?
So it's about, fairness, equality, morality, but it's not just some like abstract idea. It's about how we actually build those principles into our systems. Like think about a fair trial, equal access to opportunities, ways to make things right when somebody's been wronged. It's all about balance, that sense of order that honestly, keeps society from falling apart.
So wait, are you saying justice isn't just like a warm, fuzzy feeling? It's about actually doing stuff, making things fair, like actually upholding those values.
Exactly. And that's where rights come in. They're like the tools that let individuals live with dignity, pursue their goals.
Gotcha. And these rights, they can be legal or moral.
Right.
The presentation, hammered that point home.
Yeah. Crucial distinction. Legal rights are, well, kind of straightforward, right? They're the ones, granted and protected by the law, like your right to vote or freedom of speech. But then there's moral rights, and those are trickier. They're considered inherent to every single human being, whether the law agrees or not.
So it's like one set of rights is what the government decides we have, but the other set is what we believe we should have. Like based on what's, I don't know, fundamentally right, even if it's not, officially written down.
You got it. And you can see throughout history, people have fought to make those moral rights into legal rights.
Makes sense. Like think about the end of slavery or women getting the right to vote. Those were huge, right? Driven by the belief that, hey, these rights, they just exist, whether the law agrees at the time or not.
Exactly. And that brings us to, well, the last term, responsibilities. Remember that balance scale we were talking about? Well, our rights, they're just one side. On the other side, our responsibilities, those duties and obligations that come with living in a society and, enjoying the benefits of those rights.
So it's a trade-off. Like we get freedoms and all these rights, but we got to be like responsible citizens too, right? We got to do our part to make society work.
Exactly. The presentation calls this the social contract. It's not like you actually sign it or anything. It's more like this unspoken agreement. We're going to act in ways that benefit everyone, not just ourselves. It's what keeps everything balanced, in equilibrium.
Okay, I see how these pieces fit together. But how's it all play out in the real world? Like, how do we know if something is just? And what if people disagree on, their rights? I feel like this is where things can get messy.
Oh, yeah. And that's where the next part gets even more interesting. We'll start breaking down different philosophies of justice and how those have shaped our world today.
Okay, can't wait for that. But first, I think we need to take a closer look at this whole idea of justice. Like, what are the different ways we define it? And how does that impact, how we build a fairer society, a functioning one?
Such a good question. And that is exactly what we're going to explore next.
All right, so we've got those basic definitions down, right? Justice, rights, and responsibilities. But now I'm thinking about all the different philosophies of justice. This is where it gets really interesting, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's easy to say we want justice, but then justice for WHO and justice by, what standard? That's where the real debate starts.
So break it down for me. What are some of the big schools of thought on this whole defining justice thing?
Okay, So the presentation focuses on two main perspectives. It's a good starting point, at least. We've got distributive justice and retributive justice.
Okay, I'm following. But, like, what's the difference between those two?
All right, so distributive justice, that's all about fairness in how we divvy up resources and opportunities in society.
Okay, makes sense.
So think about things like wealth, healthcare, education. How do we make sure everyone benefits, not just a select few?
So everyone has a fair shot, no matter their background or, circumstances. So the system itself isn't rigged.
Exactly. And there are all these different theories within distributive justice on like how to achieve that fairness. Some people, they argue for like equal distribution of all resources. Others, they focus more on equity, like giving people what they need to actually succeed, even if it doesn't mean everyone gets the exact same thing.
I can see how that could get pretty heated.
Oh, for sure.
What of this other type? Retributive justice. What's the deal with that one?
So retributive justice is all about punishment for wrongdoing. Like that idea that if you break the law, if you harm someone, you deserve to be punished. Like, a punishment that actually fits the crime. This is where our criminal justice system comes into play.
Makes sense. So it's about holding people accountable, right?
Yeah.
Making sure actions have consequences.
Exactly. But even within retributive justice, there's so many different perspectives on, well, what's considered fair punishment. Some folks believe in harsh penalties, as a deterrent. But others, they might emphasize rehabilitation and restorative justice, which focuses more on, repairing the harm that was done, reintegrating offenders back into society.
Huh. So even the idea of punishment can be interpreted in so many different ways. It's kind of wild when you think about it.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Okay, so we got these two big branches, distributive and retributive. Are there any other, big ideas in justice we should be aware of?
Yeah, the presentation touches on a few others, like procedural justice. That one's all about making sure the processes, for figuring out guilt or innocence, that they're actually fair and impartial. And then there's restorative justice, which we talked about a bit before. It's more about healing and relationships than just, punishing.
Okay, so it sounds like there's no one definition of justice, really. Everyone has their own idea.
Right. It all comes down to, your values, what outcomes you're looking for.
So how do we navigate that when there's so much disagreement on what justice actually is? How do we make decisions, about laws, policies?
That's the million-dollar question. Philosophers, legal scholars, they've been wrestling with that forever. But here's the thing. Just because there isn't an easy answer doesn't mean these discussions aren't important. It's actually more important now than ever, I think, to have these conversations, about what kind of society we want, what principles we value most.
Okay, I'm with you. But how do we move from, the abstract to the real world? How does understanding these philosophies, actually make a difference?
That's where our understanding of rights comes in. Remember that difference between legal and moral rights? Well, when people feel like their moral rights, aren't being respected, that's usually what sparks social change. It's recognizing that the law isn't always just. Sometimes we have to challenge the system, advocate for something better.
Like those historical examples, right? Abolition, women's suffrage, the fight for civil rights. They were all about people demanding those moral rights be, recognized, put into law.
Exactly. And that's why this whole philosophy of justice thing is so important. It gives us a framework, right? To think critically, to see where injustice exists, to advocate for change that actually aligns with, well, our values.
Okay, it's starting to click for me.
Yeah.
But I'm still a little fuzzy on the social contract. How do, individual responsibilities fit into this bigger picture of a just society?
That's a fantastic question. And it leads us to, the heart of the relationship between individual rights and, the common good. It's recognizing that our rights, whether they're legal or moral, they're not, absolute. They come with responsibilities, limitations, necessary for society to actually function.
So it's not just about demanding our own rights. It's about, recognizing the rights of everyone else.
Yeah.
And acting accordingly.
Yeah. Remember the balance scales. The social contract is about finding that balance between individual freedoms and the needs of the whole. You can't just pursue what you want without thinking about, the impact on others, the well-being of the whole society.
I see it now. It's not just concepts. It's about understanding how connected we all are and how our actions contribute to the world we want.
That's it. And that's something the presentation really hits on in the next section.
Ooh, I'm ready. But before we move on, can we go back to legal versus moral rights for a sec? It feels like that's, really key to understanding how change happens,
Absolutely. It's crucial. And it deserves more exploration for sure. Let's dive back into that in the next part of our deep dive.
So we've been talking about all these different philosophies, right?
Yeah.
About justice and how it shapes our idea of, what a good society actually looks like. But I feel like there's this gap. Like, how do we go from big ideas to, actually changing things? How do we actually make the world a more just place?
It's the big question, right? Easy to get lost in the theories, but the real power is, well, it's putting it all into action. And actually, the presentation has some really good points on that.
Lay it on me. What are the action steps?
Okay, well, the first one, it might seem a little, like, inward-focused, but it's huge. Self-reflection. The presentation really stresses this, taking a hard look at yourself, beliefs, biases, all of it.
I mean, like, before we go out and change the world, we got to check ourselves first.
Exactly. Ask yourself the tough questions, like how do I actually live out these principles of justice? Am I even aware of my own like privileges and how those might affect, well, how I interact with others? Where do I fall short, like with the values I say I believe in?
That's a tough one. It's easier to point fingers, right, at the systems, the institutions, but real change, it starts with us.
100%. And once you've done that, the internal work, you can start to see like concrete ways to make a difference. And the good news, it doesn't have to be some big, huge, heroic thing.
So we don't all have to become like instant activists.
No way. Even small actions, if you do them consistently, they add up. It creates this like ripple effect. The presentation talks about volunteering for organizations you care about,
Right.
supporting businesses that, are ethical, just educating yourself even, having those real conversations with people who think differently.
So it's about making choices, right, in our everyday lives
Yeah.
that line up with the kind of world we want.
Yeah, exactly. And the more people who do that, those ripples, they just keep going out, right? It turns into a wave of, well, positive change.
Makes sense. Kind of like that social contract idea we talked about. If enough people actually commit to, being just, being responsible, then things actually start to shift.
Precisely. It's a group effort for sure. But it all starts with the individual, taking responsibility, trying to be better.
Gotcha. Okay, so self-reflection, everyday choices, that's a good start. But what about those times when, we see injustice happening right in front of us? Like, what if we see discrimination or someone's rights being, totally violated? What do we do?
Yeah, that's where it gets a little tougher. But the presentation has some good advice. It reminds us that, speaking up, even if it's scary or makes you uncomfortable, it's powerful. It takes courage.
But what if you're not sure what to say? Or you're, like, worried about saying the wrong thing?
I get it. But silence, a lot of times, well, it kind of means you're going along with it. Even a small statement, that's not okay. I don't agree. It can make a difference.
It's like drawing a line,
Yeah.
right? Saying we won't stand for it.
Yeah. And if you're able to, you can do even more, right? Like document what's happening, support the person who's being hurt, report it if that's the right thing to do.
I see. And even if you can't, step in right then, you can still learn about it, become a better ally for next time.
Exactly. It's a journey, this learning process. But the takeaway is we have a responsibility to not just stand there when there's injustice. Our silence makes it worse. Our voices, they can help dismantle it.
Wow, yeah. It's not just about knowing the ideas, right? It's about having the courage to act.
You said it. Matching your actions with your values, even when it's hard. And remembering that even small acts of courage, they can spread. They inspire other people to do the same.
This deep dive, it's been really, well, incredible. We've gone from like abstract stuff to, concrete ways to make a change in our own lives even.
Yeah. Hopefully it's given you a little push to keep going on that journey.
For sure. It's clear that justice and rights, it's not just, something you learn about. It's a call to action. It's a commitment to building a world where everyone has the chance to thrive.
Beautifully said. And hey, remember, this isn't the end. Keep learning, keep asking those tough questions, and keep fighting for that more just, more equal world.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.